Welcome to this special Proms at Home event. I'm Sue McGregor, and I'm happy to say I've enjoyed the Proms LitFest for many years, both as a patron of the Proms at St Jude's and also taking part in quite a few of the literary proms myself, though this year the circumstances are very different thanks to coronavirus and lockdown. And you, the audience, will be watching the live interviews probably from your own homes. By the way, these proms at home are free to attend, but we'd also love you to help us raise money for two excellent charities. They are the North London Hospice and Toynbee Hall's Youth Mentoring Programme. Please consider donating whatever you can afford to these two excellent charities. Now, this is the first of three Proms at Home literary events this year, and each time you'll be watching a live transmission of an interview about a new book. Today, the emphasis is on good food with one of Ireland's most celebrated cookery writers and a Lifetime Achievement Award winner called Darina Allen. She's particularly interested in slow food, I'm told, and she'll be talking to a familiar voice on BBC Radio 4, Sheila Dillon, who has presented the food programme there for over 20 years. So over to you, Sheila.
And I am delighted to be presenting this session of the Proms with one of the women I most admire, Darina Allen, who has a new book out. I hold it up in front of me, and it's her 19th book, One Pot Feeds All, which somehow seems to sum up her generosity because she is an enormously generous person. She is also the daughter-in-law of a woman who was as revolutionary in her way as Alice Waters in the United States, who changed the way that chefs think about their ingredients, about the way that, in a way, she brought domestic values to the restaurant industry. But I want Darina to tell these stories because I think a lot of people just know Darina from her television programs and from her many wonderful books. But in fact, she has a long, wonderful history, and she's carried on the values of her remarkable mother-in-law. So hello, Darina, there you are in Ballymaloe, and this strange technology that links us to the audience and links us together because I'm in Anglesey, which is, pretty wonderful. Darina, tell me a bit about this book before we get going on the history. One Pot Feeds All. I mean, you had a course in that at the Ballymaloe Cookery School, didn't you, which you founded?
Yes, well, we've been doing this One Pot Wonders course for a number of years now, and it was always absolutely packed and oversubscribed. So it was obvious that as people were getting more and busier, and I actually dedicated this One Pot Feeds All book to all the young people who are, and not even young people, older people as well, who are so busy nowadays, trying to keep all the balls in the air, dashing home through the traffic, maybe picking up a couple of kids from a creche, popping into a supermarket, just to collect some ingredients, knowing how important it was to put some really good, nourishing, wholesome, comforting food on the table when they got home. It's almost impossible. So this book is full of recipes, both savory and sweet recipes, but everything is cooked in one pot, one roasting tin, one baking tray. And it's the way lots and lots of us love to cook nowadays. You just pop it into the table and tuck in.
I'm glad you said about older people because that's my idea of the way I want to cook more and more. And actually under lockdown, there's been so much washing up. I got one pot feeds all. It's just my sort of cooking, especially right now. But Darina, take me out. Well, before I start asking questions, I should say to our audience, who we can't see, which is terrible, but that you can ask questions anytime on the Q&A button on your screen, and they will be stored up, and we will get to that point where Darina will answer your questions. But Darina, take us back. So you're growing up in Ireland. You're an O'Connell, is that right?
That's right.
And so what did you want to do at school? I mean, were you keen on food from the beginning?
Well, I'm the eldest of 9 children, and Sheila, there was always cooking going on in our house because my mother loved to cook, and we had a kitchen garden and hens, all that sort of thing. And then I was sent off, because we lived in a little tiny village in the country, I was sent off to boarding school to the Dominican nuns in Wicklow. And they were determined at that stage, quite, you know, visionary nuns, that we should all have a career. So do medicine, do the sciences, do law, do something. And I was quite the disappointment, because all I wanted to do was all I knew anything about really was to cook or to grow something. So anyway, they thought I might change my mind. But when I was insistent on that, they said, well, it has to be either a degree in horticulture or hotel management. So I did that, went to the top hotel school in Dublin. But you know, we're talking the mid-60s. So at that stage, men were chefs and women just ran tea shops or something like that. So it was quite the dilemma. And where would I get a job? So, and generally after this management course, you know, what you would aspire to as being, you know, an assistant manager in one of the posh hotels in Dublin. And you know, at that stage, by the way, you could count the number of good restaurants in Ireland on one hand properly, and none of them would have a woman in the kitchen. They were all men with high hats. Anyway, so it was what to do. And so I basically, the sort of job you'd aspire to as being an assistant manager, as I said, was to have a little badge and a uniform. And I thought that was another word for slave. So I just wanted to learn more about how to make homemade ice cream and fresh herbs and all that sort of thing. And I met everybody else in my class at a job, and just close to the end, I met one of the senior lecturers in the corridor at the college. And you never know in your life what's the little thing that's going to change the course of the rest of your life. And it was this moment really, because she said to me, have you not got a job yet? Everybody else in the class has. And I told her what I wanted to do. And she said to me, you're far too fussy. But anyway, she said, funny, I was at a dinner party the other night, and they were talking about this woman down in Cork, this extraordinary woman who seems to have opened a restaurant in her own house in the middle of a farm down in Cork, way out in the country. And, you know, they have a Jersey herd, so they make their own homemade ice cream, and she has big kitchen garden, lots of lovely fresh herbs, and they have their own pork and everything. And I couldn't believe my eyes, I thought, and my ears, I thought, my goodness, that's exactly what I want. And then she couldn't remember the name of the woman, but she came back a few days later with the name of, on a little piece of paper, and she said, that's the name of that woman, write to her. And the name on the piece of paper was Myrtle Allen, who's now who then became my mother-in-law. I became a member of the family by the simple expedient of marrying the boss's son. And you know, Sheila, today is her anniversary, her second anniversary of her death. And you know, it's such a...
So she was remarkable. Well, you'll tell us some of the stories. So you wrote to Myrtle, and how did she respond?
Well, she wrote me back a lovely handwritten letter, which I had for years, but in some frenzy of tidying up, I lost it. But she said, you know, we'd love to have you. I've children your age. We'd pay you £4.50 a week. And, you know, we have a tennis court and a swimming pool that you can use. It was a lovely, friendly letter, you know, and unlike many of the very formal letters my classmates had got saying, you know, a report to the tradesman's entrance at 8:30 on a Monday morning. This was a lovely, friendly letter. And I arrived down to Ballymaloe, and, you know, it was like the Myrtle reinforced everything, all my mother's values around food and everything. And at hotel school, of course, they were much more, you know, you'll use this and use that, and freeze-dried foods and all that kind of thing. But actually, Myrtle, you know, you're so right, Sheila, when you said earlier that she really elevated home cooking for chefs, really, in a way, because Myrtle she had no training at that stage, and she just opened a restaurant in their own house in the dining room, and people would arrive into the drawing room for a drink beforehand, and she just wrote the menu every day, depending on what was best in the garden and what lovely fish came in from the boats at Ballycotton, and you know what she could produce herself on the farm. She sent word around the parish that she needed somebody to rear ducks and chickens and geese for her. So she wrote the menu every day at a time when most restaurants, when they opened, they wrote the menus the same 10 years later. So it was considered to be incredibly amateurish. I mean, why would you want to write the menu every day when you could, you know, have a menu that lasted for weeks? But Myrtle cooked like a home cook. And at that stage, you may not remember, but basically there was restaurant food and there was home cooking, and it was a totally different thing. But Myrtle, if there were lovely fresh mackerel in from the boats in Ballycotton, she'd put mackerel on. She'd put wonderful cabbage from the garden on. She'd do gooseberries, black currants. But, they were very rarely found in the top restaurants at that time. Within a couple of years of opening, she had the top rating in the British, in the food guides in the British Isles for Ireland and so on. So, and I was the hostess in the kitchen at 19 years of age, and the rest were all local boys and girls who Myrtle taught us how to cook. And I went into the kitchen with her, and I was like a sponge. I just absolutely soaked up everything. And she was so generous in the way. She was a born natural teacher who she showed us, we were like little chickens around her, and we did exactly what she wanted. And she had a wonderful palate and a really interesting confidence. We're talking about a time in Ireland now when we had a major inferiority complex about our food. We always thought that what was better in the UK, or what you had in the UK or in America, or of course in France or Italy, was better than what we had there. So, but Myrtle really knew how good our produce was here in Ireland, and still is. And she cooked it simply, and it was delicious. And then, of course, I learned from her, and I, very much was so inspired, continued to be. And she always encouraged me when I went on to do television and books and all of that. And she wrote, of course, the Ballymaloo Cookbook, which is still in print after nearly 50 years. And so I've tried to continue her philosophy and to pass it on to the greater world at this stage, to the cooking school.
You said that Myrtle reinforced your mother's values.
Yes.
Values you learned at hotels management.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were many.
Sorry.
Yeah, there were many good things about what I learned at the hotel school too.
Oh no, well, we'll take that as read, Darina. We don't need to apologize to the management school. But your mother's values, I mean, they must have been very strong, because you have a brother, whose cookbook I use all the time. I mean, yeah. So the two of them, Rory O'Connell, yes. So they were strong values, your mother's values.
Yes, and again, Mommy really knew the importance of putting good food on the table for us. She used to say, if you don't put the effort into putting the food on the table, you'll give it to the doctor or the chemist. She really knew that our food should be our medicine, and better to invest in good food. And of course we had our own hens, and we had a kitchen garden, and we had our own cow. We had a Kerry cow for milk and everything. So she really knew, and it was her way of, she loved to cook. She made bread every day, and it was her way of really showing us love. And she knew the importance of sitting us all around the kitchen table. Even if we were only arguing, we were keeping the lines of communication open. And I feel that so strongly still, to make time to sit down around the table and share a big dish of something together, and so on. Yeah. And of course, again, it was cooking with the seasons at a time when, we didn't even think about these things, but that's what she did, as Myrtle did, and then also every scrap of food, there was, there was no question of wasting food or anything. I mean, if you wasted anything, you get a clip in the ear, as we say in Ireland. And, so she taught me how to make delicious things and as did Myrtle, from any little scrap of leftover. So I could make a dinner now out of the clippings of tin, as they say. And I just hate to see something beautiful. And I think it's partly as well because we grow, because I'm here on a farm, and I know the effort that goes into producing a lettuce or carrots or beetroot, or, with the beets, we'd use the beets. We cook the stalks and the leaves as well, all the bits of it, and as a sort of tribute almost to the person who put the effort into. This sounds a bit whimsy, but it's kind of just the way I am. Yeah.
Well, it's recent times have showed us that that's the way ahead. I mean, we've been so lavish with our things, and we've behaved as though we've had 3 planets, haven't we? But we have to go back to using everything.
And it's been wonderful to see how people have started to really cook again, and also to grow things and discover all these. And also, Sheila, more than anything, I hope our Department of Education in all of our countries now have realised that in a way we've been failing in our duty of care to the next generations by not equipping them with the basic skills to feed themselves, and indeed also showing them how to grow things. So I've been, believe it or not, I've started on book number 20, and this one is the loose title, which my publishers don't like, but anyway, is 100 recipes that no kid should leave school without doing. And this is, what are we like? The one thing we need to do every single day to eat. And we can see that the better our immune system, the more resistance we have against all of these things. So we're failing the next generations in all of our countries by just completely focusing on academic skills rather than also giving them the practical skills that we need to feed ourselves properly and to grow. And my God, the joy of planting a seed and then waiting for it to grow into something. All the people who have now started to grow, I don't know, many people have said to me, it's made them, of course, appreciate the work much more. And also they want to hug every farmer and grower they see. And they're much less likely to complain about the price of food when you actually sow a seed yourself and wait for 3 months for it to grow into a carrot or a beet or something. So much good. There's so much tragedy around COVID-19, but so many good things. And hopefully we'll remember them into the future if there ever is a new normal.
Well, there's a lot that we seem to have learned. Let's hope that the lessons are long lasting. But let's have a quick back before we go to, up to date. So it's 1968, you are 19, and you are, apart from Myrtle, you are the eldest person in that kitchen. So so you cook, so how long did that go on? And how did we get to the cookery school? Ballymun Cookery School is probably the most globally famous cooking school in the world. So how did you get from there to there?
Well, basically we got, Tim and I got married in 1970, came to family in 1968. We got married in 1970, and then he was only 20 and I was 21. You'd nearly be arrested nowadays. But basically, we had 4 children. And then my husband had a horticultural business. We had a big horticultural business growing tomatoes, mushrooms, big orchards, all of that, exporting as well as in the market. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, there was this sort of, as far as we were concerned, a young married couple with 4 children then, there was this sort of perfect storm. Where basically there was a big recession in Ireland at that time. We were a young married couple, we were in horticulture, and the cheap food policy had just kicked in. So instead of getting a little bit more for your produce every year, every time we went with our lovely fresh produce to the wholesalers, we just seemed to get less and less. And then also we'd gone into the EU, this whole tidal wave of regulations, stricter regulations kept pouring in, which were more, cost more. And then the supermarkets came on stream. So, and we could see the writing on the wall. The prices of food were not going to go up. They're going to keep coming down. And also labor costs started to rise significantly. So all those things came together. 4 small children and really seriously looking at losing the roof over our heads. So somebody in desperation, somebody said to us, forget the wholesalers, go along to the supermarkets, they're the thing of the future. So we were thrilled. We got a contract with one of the big supermarket chains over here for Irish apples, because they were getting a lot of criticism because they had no Irish apples. And so we made the contract, we made the deal, we agreed, the deal and everything, and then started to deliver them. So my husband would go in the morning into Cork with all the lovely fresh produce. We had, we had graders and everything. This was not a small operation, because we had 5 acres of greenhouse, 65 acres of apples. Anyway, and they had very high standard. So anyway, we go into delivering the things, and then somehow or other, always there seemed to be some reason why they wouldn't pay us what they said they would, or why they had to send back something. And then after a bit, we realized this was not accidental. It was some kind of, it just was a way of operating, which we'd never, ever come across before. So anyway, this went on for a bit. And I remember one morning, we used to have a lovely time every morning where I would get up, my husband would get up early and get the produce with these men, and he'd drive it into Cork. And then I would get the kids off to school, and then he'd arrive back from Cork, and we'd sit down together when the kids had gone to school, and we'd have our breakfast together. And I remember one morning, he came in through the kitchen door looking even more despondent than ever. And he said to me, I don't care if I have to crawl on my knees, I'm never doing that again. And a young pup of a supermarket buyer had yet again, gone back on something, so he was going to be paid less, even though they were being incredibly careful. And so he just said, we have to find a different way to earn a living. And I often say that desperation can be a wonderful thing. And I think many people have discovered this even in the last 14 weeks. But when your back is to the wall, you have to find a solution when you have 4 kids and you're in almost to lose the roof over your head. So anyway, as I said to you, I think when I was at boarding school, I had no ambition to be a career woman or any of that. All I wanted really was to find a nice chap, preferably with a bit of money, who I could marry, and then he would keep me in the kind of way I'd like to be kept. So suddenly I was, we thought, well, what are we going to do now? So anyway, we put our heads together and we thought, what talents have we, what resources have we between us, and to earn a living in a different way. So I could cook, and I also realized that a lot of my friends, if we had them around for a bit of supper, and I'd make something, could be something simple, even mac and cheese or something, whatever, and they say, how'd you make that? How'd you do it? And at some stage, the penny dropped that I could seem to do things very easily, or fairly easily, that they didn't. So I thought maybe I could teach. So anyway, we decided that we would convert some of our farm buildings into a little cooking school. And I started actually by giving classes on a Saturday morning first to get over, always when, if you have to do something, you do it. And then the first time you do it is the most difficult. And if you manage to get through that, it gives you a bit more confidence. And so first there were just demonstrations, and all the lovely ladies from Montenotte in Cork, that's the really posh part of Cork, okay, would come down in their BMWs and little mink jackets and whatever, just lovely and very encouraging. And we'd hide our rusty Renault 4L, I don't know whether you remember what a Renault 4L was, around the back. So I started giving cooking classes like that in the morning, and then we decided we'd open a residential cooking school, converting some of the farm buildings. We did that in September 1983. And I started with 9 students and then 11. And then within 2 years, we had our first American student. And then I very brassily changed my brochure to Ballymaloe International Cookery School.
It was Myrtle who said, use the Ballymaloe name, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I was terribly lucky because, at that stage, the name Darina Allen, or the village of Shanagary, actually had a pottery here. And I was trying to think, well, would call it the Shanagary Cooking School or the Darina Allen Cooking School. And Myrtle and my equally wonderfully generous father-in-law said, no, I think you should call it the Ballymaloe Cooking School. And my goodness, can you imagine? Ballymaloe name was already well known at that stage and stood for quality and integrity and all of that, and freshness. So it was a huge boost to me to be able to use the name, a huge act of faith in me too. And then it gave me the responsibility to make sure I delivered what was expected from that name. So, and of course I was so lucky. The school, we're living in the middle of a 100-acre farm, and we have 10 acres of gardens, and we still have an acre of greenhouses. We had, as I said, 5 acres originally. So we can produce all this beautiful produce for the students to cook with. And it's organic, and has been organic for nearly 30 years now. So the reason why a lot of students come from, and they do come from all over the world now, at least we're close to the moment, which we're opening again on the 29th of June. But the reason why they come is because the school is on a farm, and they literally can see how the food is produced from that much hackneyed phrase now, the farm to the fork. And then we have a little, I'm a dairy farmer as well. I have 7 Jersey cows, so we have a little micro dairy. We also have a bread shed where we make sourdough breads and 48-hour fermented sourdough breads. And we also have a little fermentation shed. Now, when I say that, we're like trailer trash, because the fermentation shed and the bread shed are in kind of trailers that we converted and so on. But and we have hens. We're so lucky to have, and pigs and all of that. So we're so lucky to have all this gorgeous produce for the students, not only to cook with, but to learn how it's produced and sow seeds and harvest and so on. Yeah.
I mean, this brings up, one of the biggest issues. I don't think it's quite so marked in Ireland, but it's certainly marked in the UK, that, that it's all very well for you, Darina. You've been lucky, inherited a small farm, you've had a mother-in-law. I mean, there's not much cash in any of this, but anyway, you've been lucky. So here you are, organic food, and I mean, what I find frustrating as a food journalist is to try and talk about this, as that this has something to do with everybody. I mean, what do you say when people attack you and say, well, it's all very well for you, Darina, and people with money?
Well, this is a really good point, Sheila, because that it's very interesting, because, of course, often organic food is more, not always, but it's an chemical-free food is more expensive because it takes, for example, a chicken, it takes 3 times longer to rear it, and all of that expensive organic feed and everything. So it does cost more. But look, my reply to that is, look, now there are definitely people who cannot afford the choice, but everybody deserves and needs wholesome, nourishing, chemical-free food to keep them well. But basically, I often say to people then, well, hang on a minute now. When people say, they say, well, I can't afford to spend another 50 euros or whatever it is every week on food. And I say, well, hang on a minute. If you think about it, we all make choices about how we spend our time and our money and so on. And I say, look, how much, think about it now, how much did you spend on those nails last week, or on magazines, or on a pint in the pub or whatever. So people very often,
coffee, which is always my measure.
Yes, exactly. And very often people realize that actually when they think about it, food is a long way down our list of priorities, actually. So my thing is, and actually it's been very interesting during this COVID-19 period, because we have a farm shop here on the farm where people can come and buy produce, and the teachers have been cooking for the shop and also growing down things. So when people come, people are coming to buy local food. Many of them, there's been a sea change in attitude to buying local food, but not only that, the biggest change for me has been suddenly people are thinking about the food they're buying. And people who would never have bought organic or even looked for chemical-free food before, often not even local food, they suddenly realize that they deeply know that there is actually a connection between the kind of food we eat and feed our families and how we feel and so on. So basically, so people are suddenly realizing they're better off to invest a bit more money in really good, nourishing, wholesome food rather than just spending it on meds and on supplements, because a jar of supplements can cost you 15, 20 quid and for something or other. And of course they absolutely have their place, but if you invest in nourishing, wholesome food and putting a big dish of something on the table for everyone to tuck into, basically it's better than, as Mummy used to say years ago, give it to the doctor or the chemist, because there's no question our food can be our medicine. And oftentimes nowadays, people know more about the lives of celebrities than they know about how their food is produced. It's absolutely extraordinary very often how little thought we were giving to the food we were eating and how little importance. And, so I say, look, it's very simple. All we need is real food, preferably in season, of course in season, because then it'll be fresher and better.
And cheaper if it's in season.
And of course cheaper as well. Sorry, I sound like such an old headmistress with all that, but anyway.
Join the club.
But I have 20, what have I got? No, I was about to say I have 21 grandchildren. I haven't. I've got 11 grandchildren. And so they're really funny because they run down into the greenhouses. They eat they pick the peas off the plant and they eat the kale off the plant almost. That's like their supermarket. And their friends think they're crazy, It's very interesting, but that's their norm. So, but again, as you say, we're very fortunate to live on a farm. But look, in a way, Sheila, we all know now that even if you live in an apartment or anywhere in a city, you can grow even on a windowsill, even if you don't have a balcony. And even with a little recycled container, sprinkle in a few salad seeds or something, or some radishes, and the kids will be thrilled. Show the kids how to do it as well. And then the other wonderful thing that we've been sharing the knowledge of with here as well is during the COVID and other times is foraging. Again, teaching people to recognize the foods in the wild that they can eat. And wild food is incredibly important for another reason. You see, so much of our ordinary food, and you know this very well, and many of the viewers will too, has been, it's now produced, farmers are now, and for 20 years have been encouraged to produce the maximum amount of food at the minimum cost. So everything is suffering, and everything has been, has been kind of manipulated to produce the maximum yield, and so on. But none of the wild food has been tampered with. So all the wild food still has its full complement of vitamins, minerals, trace elements in it. So that's another reason why it's really good to be able to recognize what's good to eat in the wild. It could be anything from dandelions to elderflowers are in profusion at the moment, wonderful with gooseberries, and to make cordials and champagne and put under a sponge cake in a tin to perfume the sponge. So, and you know, it could be as simple as nettles, dandelions, you know, all kinds of good things. So, and there, it's important to have those as part of our diet too. But these are the skills, the forgotten skills that are wonderful to pass on to our children and our grandchildren as well.
Which you've done so well. Well, we've reached the point where we're going to take some questions from our audience. As I said earlier, you can just press on your screens the Q&A, and at the minute on my screen, I don't see any questions at the moment. So I will carry. Oh yes, Veronica Kennard says, "What's your favorite recipe?"
Oh my goodness, Veronica, that's a really difficult question. It may sound very simple, but I'm so fickle because it depends what's in season. I get so excited about the first rhubarb. At the moment, I'm so excited about the green gooseberries in my garden. And I put those together with the elderflower that I just mentioned a few minutes ago to make like an elderflower green gooseberry and elderflower compote or a pie or something. And so when the first mackerel come in, I'm all excited about that. And I'm very happy to eat the same thing 3 days in a row when it's just really, you know, fresh and delicious. So this is a very exciting time of the year now because you know, the Gardens of Green has the summer produce has just come online. There's hardly enough meals to eat all the lovely fresh produce that's coming in. That's a very difficult question, Veronica.
It is a difficult question, and while we wait for another question, I have a recipe question. Somebody yesterday, a neighbor, gave me some very young beetroots. I mean, they're almost like radishes. They're beautiful, and the leaves are lovely. What should I do with the leaves?
Well, the leaves and the stalks, Sheila, because of course you can use the roots, and when they're very little like that, they only take about 10 or 12 minutes to cook, and they're fantastic served hot as well. I mean, a lot of times people just think of beetroots as pickled beetroot in a jar. They're wonderful served hot. So cook them first, rub off the skins, and then just quarter them or slice them, toss them back into a saucepan, and it could be with extra virgin olive oil. But you know, it's fantastic if you add in a big dollop of cream into it and a little flaky sea salt and have that with duck or something. It's delicious. But then the stalks, chop up the stalks and cook those in a little boiling salted water, and those definitely drain and drizzle with extra virgin olive oil. Absolutely delicious. And then the leaves, if they're young, you can put them into a salad. Otherwise, you can cook them exactly like spinach. And you know something I just heard the other day? The leaves have more nutrients in them than the beets. Imagine that. Oh. Now, I love because you can use the 3 parts. And again, there are lots of vegetables like that, even with the radishes. It's not just the radish you eat, those lovely little young leaves as well in a salad, or make a radish leaf soup. Absolutely delicious. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's really helpful because I was just looking at them before I came to talk to you. The question from Susan Green: is it better to use frozen fish if you don't have a good fishmonger locally?
Well, you know, I think, Susan, it can be, because when they freeze, the best frozen fish is frozen on the boats. Just after they catch it, they freeze it on the boats. It's like a sort of almost a fish factory on the boats, and it's absolutely fresh. And it sounds, for me, who all my life I've talked about fresh food and local food, to say that frozen can indeed be better is something. But I think you're right there. Yeah.
Better to use a good frozen if you don't have a fishmonger. Better to eat. Okay, Susan.
And the thing about fresh fish, because sometimes people find it difficult to know when fish is fresh, and you hear this sort of thing about the eyes shouldn't be sunken and this, that, the other. Well, I can tell you it's about 10 days before the eyes sink. So basically you need to be getting out of town at that stage. But fresh fish does not smell. If you were blindfolded and it was right up to your nose, you would scarcely be able to recognize it as fish. And of course it's fresh and shiny and stiff and all of that. But the main thing is if it smells as even a little whiff of fish, it's not fresh. It doesn't matter how the fishmonger winks at you, it's not fresh. Okay.
Okay. David White asks you, is there a cooking implement you couldn't do without?
Well, this I can answer quickly. I don't know what's the proper name for it, but it's a little coil whisk. It's the little sort of old-fashioned little whisk, that not a chefy balloon whisk, but those little small whisks that you get for, I don't know, a few quid in a little hardware shop or something. It's my desert island utensil, because it goes right out to the edge of the saucepan, and you can whisk up some cream with it in a minute, and it's terrific. So that's, I think I call it a coil whisk. You know, it's round like that, and it has a little coil and a handle. And so that's, I give it to presents to people when they're getting engaged or married, with a chopping board. The way to everybody's heart, Sheila, to the tummy. And I have to tell you that at the cooking school, one of the things that's such joy is that we have so many romances. You see, we have short courses, you know, days, weekends, weeks, but we also have three-month courses in the year. And basically, there are so many romances. So it's, you know, we've had people come back to propose here. And we now joke that it's actually to be able to cook the way to everybody's tummy, it's better than Tinder any day. A lovely, the smell of fresh bread when they're coming in from work, that does the trick. That brings on a proposal, okay?
I mean, it's like, I mean, that was part of the appeal, wasn't it, of early Jamie Oliver, The Naked Chef, where, you know, this was a way to get the girls, you know.
Exactly.
I mean,
in the bird.
at all now, but I mean, that was part of his appeal to young men. Learn to cook and be an enormous success.
Oh, I have such admiration for Jamie, the way he got the young people cooking. And now many of the millennials are really cooking and really going out of the way to get beautiful produce to feed their families. It's, you know, there's a lot to be hopeful about. And I'm always a glass half full person anyway, but yeah. And COVID has taught us many terrific lessons. Yeah.
It does. I mean, in a series of programs, we've made different aspects of it on the food program. You know, you just see people becoming much more involved. People who, you know, edgy, fashionable young people in cities, you know, suddenly not living off takeaways and going out to restaurants. You know, they're discovering the pleasures of their local shops and turning them into something.
Yeah. Or making a loaf of bread or something. I mean, when somebody bakes a loaf of bread, take their first loaf of bread out of the oven, my goodness, it's like catching your first fish. I can't believe it. And actually, this is one of the reasons why I love teaching cooking so much, because it's like I could be teaching maths or algebra or something like that or whatever, and it's all very important. But basically, it's not like teaching somebody how to cook a loaf of bread or make a soup or a lovely bubbly stew. It's like giving somebody a gift for life if you pass on a cooking skill to them like that. So how fortunate am I to have that opportunity?
I mean, one of the things, I don't know, you know, I'm sure you have a point of view on this. I find kind of strange in this COVID period that, you know, it's been 3 months now, and since, well, it will be this week, since lockdown in the UK, and there's all these quality food producers in Britain who hold up the rural economies, struggling because their restaurant business is all gone. Not one word from anybody in government about food. Nothing. I mean, apart from, it seems like pushing the trade deal through with the US so that we can get, you know, their antibiotic, hormone-fed things. You know, it's really depressing. But anyway.
I agree with you. It's the same over here with our HSE. Basically, one of the first things I would have thought we should be reminding people is the importance of feeding themselves well during this, to build up their resistance and their antibody level and everything. It's a fundamental thing to remind people. So anyway, there.
Yeah. Well, there's another question here from someone who wishes to remain anonymous. What are your thoughts about the vegan movement, Darina? Is it here to stay?
Well, I basically am a flexitarian, I suppose you might say. I love vegetables, I love meat and so on. I'm very, very fussy about the quality of the meat and fish that I eat, that it's humanely reared and all of that. And I'm not prepared to eat something where an animal or anything else has suffered for my dinner. But I strongly feel that you know, I'm worried about, I know there's some very healthy, of course, there are very healthy vegans. And if I decided to be a vegan, as you have reminded me how lucky I am to live in the middle of a farm with lots of produce in the gardens and everything, I'd have lovely, fresh, organic produce that I could eat lots and lots of. But the problem nowadays for a lot of people is, if you decide to have a vegan diet for all the different reasons that one might decide, a lot of the foods that people have access to, you know, in the ordinary world, so to speak, if you're buying everything directly through the usual retail system, a lot of it is nutritionally deficient. We know that so many of the vegetables, some of the vegetables and fruit now have less than 50% of the nutrients they had, in some cases less than 30% of the nutrients. It's all scientific research on this, that they had in the 1950s. So to actually get enough nutrients, even if you are using fresh vegetables and fruit all the time, I worry that people are not going to be able to be nourished. And many people do have difficulty with keeping up the nutrient level and are showing signs of deficiency. So I worry about it. I can understand why people decide to follow things. And I'm worried that we're going to see lots and lots of health issues within a couple of years for the reason that people can't get enough nourishment through the ordinary system unless they are growing and have access to all organic food all of the time, or most of the time. That's just my...
I mean, I wonder that a lot of the young people joining the vegan movement are not more cynical about the food industry, because it's very easy to make highly processed vegan food. And just as it's easy to make highly processed anything, but
yes,
if you make highly processed vegan food, you make it with a lot of cheap vegan ingredients, but you can charge a lot more money.
Money for it, yeah. No, there are lots of questions there. Yeah,
there are a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to, you know, you were saying your spiral whisk is your favorite, your desert island thing. I'm staying at an old friend's house. I came up here and got trapped up here before lockdown in Anglesey. And he is a great cook. He is a seriously great cook. I mean, he's an architect, but he's a great cook. And I'm making this list of how I can't imagine he's managing to cook here, because there's no pestle of mortar, there's no stick blender, but a pestle of mortar. How do I crush garlic with salt if I don't have I cut my hand the other day. Yeah.
Get a saucepan and bang it down on it, not to split it. And I presumably have a chopping knife, have you?
Well, I've managed to sharpen it. It wasn't very sharp, yes.
And then, put the tip of it down on, once you've taken off the peel, put the tip down of the knife down on the garlic, and then with a little salt, perhaps just this kind of movement. And then it's a little laborsome, but that'll do it. Yeah.
Well, before we have to switch off.
Too, microplane's good too. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So he has one of those. Before we have to sign off, Darina, I just want, just a quick sum up. If you were, food czar, not only for Ireland, but for all of the UK right now, what would be the first thing you'd say after COVID?
Well, make your food shopping the priority in the week, really. And to just go out of your way to find real food, and rather than edible food-like substances. I mean, remember that all of those highly processed foods, as you said it earlier, they're just adding, very often you're getting less nourishment and adding more expense to it. So try to find fresh food, and then cook something simple. It could be one pot of something or other, and put it onto the table. But I think we've learned the importance of giving good food, putting good food on the table, giving it much higher priority. A
higher priority for food, good food, yes.
But back for 1 second to that vegan question, because I also think it's really important to stress that not all meat is produced, and not all animals are reared in the same way. There's many people rearing animals in a totally humane way, and respecting them and slaughtering them. And there's nothing like some good meat, really good protein, and so on. So it's very important to really make a big difference and to look out for. In the UK, you have so many wonderful artisans and small producers and people who are small farmers who are producing quite a different kind of nourishing food, who love and look after and care for their animals and respect them. This is a whole different kind of thing. But some really I think all of us are eating less meat than we might have done a number of years ago, and we need probably less than we do. But if it is going to be a piece of meat, let it be a beautiful chicken that was properly reared and has an honourable end as a beautiful dish on your plate that you celebrate with your family.
Absolutely.
Or beef or lamb or whatever. Yeah.
You know, that too often we take the American model of animal production as though that is what goes on over here, which is in general almost 99% not the case. But Darina, have to go.
None of us would condone that in any possible way. Yeah.
Darina Allen, it was such a pleasure, and I'm sorry we couldn't have talked for longer, and thank you to our audience and for the questions, and I hope you find it in your pocketbook, if you can, to support the North London Hospice and Toynbee Hall's youth mentoring program. And it was marvelous to be here, and I hope next year that this event will be a live one, and we'll see you all. Okay, goodbye. And I'm passing on back to Sue McGregor.
Very much, Sheila Dillon and Darina Allen, and to you, the audience at home, for joining us today. If you'd like to buy today's book from an independent bookseller, then the organisers of Proms at Home will be happy to send you the email with a link to the bookshop, West End Lane Books. And if you were planning to support Toynbee Hall and the North London Hospice, you'll be able to do that via a link to the same email the Proms organisers are going to send you. Thank you so much for joining us today.